Barre, your book of the month.
Okay. My book of the month is called Business Heroes. And the reason it's my book of the month is it was written by a friend of mine. And he needs the money.
Who is he?
Sandy Dunlop. Sandy Dunlop deserves 2 minutes of your time because Sandy, with whom I worked closely for a number of years, is an unusual character with an unusual gift. And Sandy was brought up in India. He describes himself as a Kerry Indian.
Kerry Indian as somebody from Kerry that is Indian?
He's someone who...
or an Indian that lives in Kerry?
Became Irish only after having been born in India.
Okay.
So an early memory, for example, is the riots when the Hindus and Muslims at the foundation of Pakistan and all that. I mean, he goes back a couple of centuries, Sandy does. But Sandy, anyway, is this mix. And he has always been interested in stories, legends, myths. The story he takes in Business Heroes is the hero's journey. So those of you who are familiar with Joseph Campbell and The Hero with 1,000 Faces and all that literature, right, will be familiar with this. I know you, for one, are very familiar with all that, Ron. I don't need to tell you. But, although you look very puzzled at the moment.
Okay, go on.
Business Heroes is applying the hero's journey to the world of business. So, simple example, you can find yourself working with people in business who are facing, whose responses to questions of innovation are very predictable. The reason is they're behaving as warriors and they're thinking as warriors. Today's battles, perhaps yesterday's battles, but not tomorrow's, right? On the other hand, you can find people who you could describe as heroes who will tend to be leading the innovation, often maybe very brave and maybe the last thing they ever do in the business. So heroes tend to get killed. On the other hand, they also fight warriors quite a lot. On the other hand, you have a CEO maybe who was a hero and who is successful. So the reward is they become CEO. That sets an entirely different culture within the company and a different attitude towards innovation. But if you have a warrior who becomes CEO, then watch out if you're a hero, because you can be very easily a dead hero and you'll be isolated, a minority. So you can see how when you map some of this thinking onto organizations and decision making and all that kind of stuff, it can throw up some interesting results. If you take it a little step further, though, and you say that that the world of brands is actually a world of stories, and if you were to be really pushy about it, you might say you could probably boil the stories down, like you can boil all of us down into 5 families or 3 people or something like that. In the same way, you could come up with those archetypal stories and those archetypal figures that can be found in every culture's mythology. He's worked out a sort of a database, if you will, though it's far from as neat and tidy as a database, of archetypal myths and stories that will drive brands, contemporary brands. And then you look at a brand and see to what extent it is aligned with that story and to what extent it's not. And if you look at the history of the success of that brand, quite often you can correlate that with when it strayed off message, when it was originally connected with the story of, say, liberation, and it was a sort of a liberation story where the brand, you use this brand and it frees you from constraints, and as a young person it gives you the kind of freedom and independence that you seek from that. Then you don't have to struggle to find underneath that a story that might be the story of say in the Irish tradition it might be Cuchulainn, or in the Greek tradition it might be I don't know, who could it be? Achilles fighting the Trojans. And so an understanding of brands is helped by an understanding of these archetypes. Also, as you start to look at the archetypes, realize that you can find the same stories cropping up in different cultures. And all of this is, in a simplified version, found in Business Heroes. I kind of use it as a shorthand. Because if you're talking to someone who's involved in innovation, they're wondering why nobody speaks the same language they do. Well, they're speaking the language of a hero. Also, their perspective on the world will be governed by that. They will tend to see things in heroic terms. And why don't the other people understand? Because they're warriors and they're fighting today's battles or yesterday's battles. Short term, defensive, conservative. Then you can look for other roles as well, but those are useful for starters.